Okay, we're ready to get started again, so please take your seats.
But there are some forms that our historians try to kind of piece all that together. It's been kind of an interesting thing. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our final presentation of the afternoon. And this one focuses on Mount Vernon. And this is the third time that we've run this GIS meeting, but this is the first time that we're actually presenting some of our own deployments of GIS here on the estate. And to present that to you, we have Eric Benson of the MVLA. Tom Reinhardt couldn't be with us today, but Rob Fink of Quinn Evans Architects, who is heavily involved in this project, will be joining us, and also Patrick Gehagen of Esri. And this presentation is entitled Building a Historic Building Information Model at Mount Vernon.
Okay, thank you, Luke. I don't have any slides to show at the moment, but I'm going to sort of give the background and the introduction for the project. Those of you that stayed in here got to see a little bit about that already. But the basic is our Tom Reinhardt, who, as Luke said, was not able to be here today, who is our Deputy Director for Architecture. He had the vision to create what we've called an HBIM, Historic Building Information Model. And BIM has been around for a long time. That's an industry standard building information model system, mostly for new buildings, for being able to model and then model the building in 3D, but actually store data about that and use that as an ongoing management system for the maintenance and monitoring of the building. Well, we wanted to take that same concept and apply it to a historical structure, namely the mansion and eventually the outbuildings of Mount Vernon. And so this is obviously a big project to model such a historic structure to a very fine degree of detail, and you'll see examples of that amount of detail to be able to help us manage all of our information. We have 160 years of records about the mansion of our own since we've taken over the property. And then even further back, being able to link all that in one place so you can go in, say, look at this door, what is all the information that we know about that, and have it all in one place that is accessed visually. And so we've had some great partners on this, namely Quinn Evans Architects, who Rob Fink is here today representing. He's done a lot of the work as far as actually the modeling of the mansion, and then Patrick Gehagen of Esri, who has helped us a lot with the 3D visualizations and integration into GIS. And so we wanted to go even beyond just having this really detailed model living in some program somewhere. We wanted to be able to actually take that out, be able to give access through the web to the public, to others in a really easy, intuitive way, and we wanted to place the buildings in their context of the landscape and be able to incorporate our GIS data so that you'd have one seamless experience where you could go right into the mansion, get that detail about the doorknob, fly out, and then go look at all the trees, all in one environment. And so that was sort of where we wanted to head with this and look at it as a way to unite all of our data that we have about the entire estate. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Rob to begin with. He'll show you in Autodesk Revit how we model the mansion, and then we'll go to Patrick.
Okay. All right. You can just put it down there. Okay. As Eric said, I'm Rob Fink. I'm with Quinn Evans Architects. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we actually set up the BIM for use in the actual, what we're calling historic building information management that was shown in the web scene earlier during the break. So to start off with, we wanted to start with a proof of concept for what we're trying to do here. So we wanted to focus on just one area of the mansion, and they had just recently restored the new room, so there was a lot of data about this room that they had available to them. Sorry about that. So it was great because we had all this fresh information about the building, about this particular room, and not to mention this room was also probably the most ornate and significant room of the mansion. So we went through a 4-step process to be able to do this. The first was to look for some software that would be able to achieve our goals. The second was to be able to collect all the data that we needed to create the HBIM. Third was the creation and actual organization of that data then for the HBIM. And then lastly, come up with a user interface that a common person would be able to navigate. So, like I said, when we first started, we didn't really know what software we were going to use here, so we had to go through this investigation process. We knew it had to meet several requirements. We wanted it to be off the shelf because we didn't have deep pockets here to be going out and programming our own software. We didn't want it to require any special skills for a person to be able to use. It had to support 3D visualization. We wanted it to be interoperable with Autodesk Revit, which is the modeling tool that we use for the mansion. And then we also wanted it to be able to pull data from the Revit model and also push data. So we started first off looking at a 3D PDF. That didn't really work out very well because it doesn't push data and it tends to be limited just to a single building. Otherwise, it was great. For the 3D visualization, it was fantastic. But we had to put an X on that one. Second, we looked at facilities management software, which did accomplish a lot of what we were looking for here, especially with the records management. However, it tends to be very expensive, and it did not, all the solutions that we looked at did not support 3D visualization. So we had to put an X in that one too. Next, we have cloud-based construction management software, which was fantastic because basically it would put everything in the cloud. It has all these records associated with it. The problem is that it's not, the market that it's after isn't for facilities management. It's really meant for construction. So the pricing structure didn't work. It was based on a construction project with an end date. This project doesn't have an end date, so it's a continuous project that we needed to be able to work with. So we had to cross that solution out as well. We even just looked into just using plain old Revit. The problem is that that does require special skills. It's not something anybody can just pick up and start using. Lastly, we actually came across Arcgis, and we got to put a green check next to that. Granted, it does require special skills, but we lucked out because Eric was on staff, so they already had those skills. So that worked out really well for us. It also tends to, as you folks all know, it manages a lot of data. Patrick will be showing us later how he's able to pull data from Revit to and from. And the web scene, which you ultimately saw there in the video if you were here during the break, does not require any special skills. So that's really what we were after, and we were excited about that. So next we went on to the collection of data. We started off with a point cloud. Mount Vernon had contracted with Direct Dimensions up in just outside of Baltimore to scan the entire estate, and they've started off with the mansion. So we have this fantastic point cloud that gives us all this data. There were some challenges that we were confronted with this that I'll get into a little bit later, but otherwise this was a fantastic resource. We also had photographs that we were able to use, both photographs that were taken today and historical photographs that showed some of the deconstruction of the mansion. We had historic survey drawings as well that the estate was able to provide to us that we were able to use. There was a historic structures report and a cultural landscape report as well. We had CAD files. There was a lot of data. There's just a ton of data. In fact, that's part of the problem is that they have too much data and they don't know how to organize all this. So next, how do we then go about organizing this data? And so we sat down with the team here and discussed all the different levels of information. And this actually goes back a little bit to what the National Park Service was showing earlier with the standards for their cultural resources management. but we kind of did this on our own. So we started off with this hierarchy of information that eventually turns out to look like this. So it starts off with the global George Washington's world, like all the areas of influence around the world that George Washington has had. And then we go down to the level of the viewshed. And then below that, we get down into the neighborhood, down to the estate, then the landscape areas. And then from there, it breaks apart into building resources. We have landscape resources, building resources. And then, so the BIM part actually covers the building resources here on the right-hand side. And I'll go into this a little bit further here. So we came up with this chart where we started off with the resource, which would be the mansion. And then we would then cut it down to the level. So cellar, first floor, second floor, et cetera. And then room level within there. And then we start getting into the assemblies, such as a wall, floor, ceiling. This particular example is for a wall. So then we have the plaster and lath, which are components of that wall that we may be able to separate out. And then data about all that information that then gets associated with it. So for this data, we had to create custom parameters within Revit itself. So these data fields that we want to associate for the HBIM, we associated with these objects within Revit. So we also had this issue of how well do we document that something is represented within the model. So we assigned this what we call a level of development metric. It's a 3-digit metric that covers the location, the shape, and the material of each object within the model. So the more accurate the representation, for example, for location, the higher the number, and it's on a scale of 1 to 3. Same thing with shape, scale 1 to 4, and same with the material as well. And so, for example, this is an image of the model here with the point cloud on top of it. So, as I said before, the point cloud was fantastic in helping us create the model. However, we ran into problems where the point cloud would show that the fact that, you know, it's very literal. So if the surface is bowed or warped or something like that, that's how it shows. And so Revit doesn't always deal well with those types of surfaces. So for example, the roof you can see here shines right through the point cloud because the roof is perfectly straight. However, the actual roof sags, so you don't get to see those points. So the way that we address that in the model to be able to know how well something is represented physically is with that LOD, or level of development. So in this case, it would probably have a lower LOD for the actual shape. So the location of the roof may be correct, but the shape of it may be somewhat off. And that would tip somebody off to know, hey, I need to then go back and look at other additional resources to get more information about this. So we went into some fairly significant detail, more detail than architects typically go into when they model buildings. For example, some of the molding, trim, and even like the door hardware. We were very particular to model the hardware correctly here. As Tom mentioned in that presentation that he performed at Esri, you know, they want a really high level of detail so that they can start to really pinpoint where they can put their records that they have for those resources. And the other great thing about it is that you can start to see the building in ways that you can't physically see. Here, for example, is just the framing around the new room is shown. This isn't something that you can ever really do without having to literally take the building apart. But for a researcher that's interested in some of the joinery, say, for example, of some of the structure, they could look at this and get this information. So lastly, we worked on the user interface. This was a mock-up of a user interface that we had done internally at Quinn Evans, working with Mount Vernon. This was before we had talked to Esri. So we like the idea of having all these, being able to navigate three-dimensionally through the model, clicking on an object, and then having these tabs that are set up for different use cases. For example, we have current conditions, there would be preservation, there would be Washington era information, there would be interpretation, and then lastly, there would be systems and utilities. And each one of these tabs, the goal is to have the end user be able to just start to input the information if they want to update the information regarding this. So if somebody does like a door inspection, they can go in and say, okay, I so-and-so just checked this door on such and such date, there was this issue with it, and then that record is captured from here on out. And then lastly, we did talk to Esri, and then they were keyed us into the whole web scene. And Patrick will help explain here in a moment how that whole web scene gets created from Revit. But it was fantastic because this is very close to where we're at right now with or where we want to be with our user interface. We just need to customize this a little bit, and we'll be exactly where we want to be.
Prototype.
Yeah, that is a prototype. This is all a proof of concept, basically, is the idea. But we're moving forward with this. So anyhow, that's the creation of the BIM. You know, let Patrick take over on translation to GIS.
Set this back a little bit. I usually am loud enough. Okay, just took a second. All right, so surprise, we're starting in Revit, not ArcGIS. Esri's involvement in the prototype got over a year ago, and it wasn't actually through Mount Vernon, it was directly with the architecture firm. And so our kind of prototype delivery was intended to be for architects to deliver on their own without any GIS person behind them or next to them coaching them through the technical GIS steps that they could present to Mount Vernon on their own. And so it kind of highlights the user friendliness of a web scene, of 3D in a browser. And so I'm going to take the next probably, gosh, I don't know, 25 minutes, maybe shorter, just to cover some of the high-level workflows from a technical perspective that brought all this together on the stage last week. And so obviously it starts in Revit with the work of the architects. And I don't, as a GIS professional, want to do any messing around in here in their domain because they're highly trained and educated and might get mad at me. But I do want them to do one thing or maybe one or two things before they give us a version of it or a copy of it. And the first thing is typically these models live at 0, 0, like most other CAD data or other BIM models, but they don't necessarily have to be. And so the very first workflow item I would suggest, or that we usually perform, is specifying coordinates at a point. So this allows us to go in and click anywhere. Once it saves. Say from a top-down view, it's like a corner of the building, and you have the opportunity of going in and punching in your coordinates and your elevation. And then also there's this angle from project north to true north. Architects like things square in their projects and their views, and so it's not usually at true north, it's usually at some project north. And so we need to calculate that angle from project north to true north so it can line up with the rest of our GIS data when we bring it over to GIS world. Same thing for the latitude, longitudes, or northings and eastings. In this case, it's State Plane, Virginia North. So we either from ArcGIS grab northing and eastings or get them from, say, like a surveyor or some other known survey point on the property. Elevation, we can also punch that in for where we want to start. However, that's a lot of times offset by the values used in Revit for their what they call levels. So right here, there's some levels. First floor is 8 feet, cellar's 1 floor. I, as a non-architect, just new to Revit and all this other BIM world stuff a couple years ago, figured that that would be, you know, where they punch in the ground elevation, and that'd be great. It'll line up perfect, right? They don't really do it that way. They kind of use it more as an organizing principle of floor levels and various 0, 100 base numbering systems that add 100 meters or 100 feet to the base elevation. So we can cover all the aspects of it, the location and the elevation and the rotation here, and punch that in. And then early last year, I think in January or February, our partner company, Safe Software, they make our what we call our data interoperability extension, released a plugin for Revit that will allow the architects to hit this little FME Revit export button and basically make a zipped up, very efficient export of the Revit model. So this RVZ file you can actually open up in WinZip, and it basically pulls out all the geometries and all the attributes that we would need to recreate this model in the GIS side as a geodatabase. So you run that, and the idea is that you can download this plugin without having any ArcGIS or anything installed. You just need to have Revit. You install the plugin, it's free, and then the architect can locate the building, give the angle, click the button, and hand off the file to the GIS professionals, who will then bring it back onto the landscape because it's not here right now. All right, so over on the GIS side, that starts, you can pretty much start anywhere. You can start in ArcMap, can start in ArcCatalog if you really wanted, because it's just a geoprocessing import. So here, data interoperability tools, quick import. Come here and you have, excuse me, Autodesk Revit as one of the formats. We're doing a lot more with 3D Studio models as well. And then also industry foundation classes, which is a standard in the BIM world for exchanging BIM content. What Safe Software really did was just take that industry foundation class and customize it a little bit to work with their workflows and get the right formatting of things in the way that they need it. And it makes it easier for us to bring it into a geodatabase. Basically point at the file, point at the data set, the RVZ or that gets spit out. I'm not going to run it because it would take up the rest of my time. And you pick the output staging geodatabase, file geodatabase, what have you, wherever you want to put it. What you get out of that is a feature class, multi-patch feature class called Surface by default. And in that feature class, you get a couple fields by default. You get, of course, the typical GIS object ID field, shape. Then you get this element field. So basically, it's telling you what it was identified in Revit as. So there is a covering or plate or some other building element. This gives us a field to then filter on to pull out doors, walls, windows, cornices, moldings, stairs, however we want to slice it and dice it, or however the end user wants it sliced and diced for them to consume it and use it. The name, we get the name, it's basically a concatenation of a bunch of information in Revit, just put all into one big field. Basically, it's the family name and some other identifiers. The key piece is right after the colon. There's a number for every record. That is called the Revit Instance ID. And that's kind of the key field that we would use to then join it back to all the Revit attributes. What I neglected to show in Revit was you're also able to export out all of your schedules. All right, so I'm basically doing a simple old school export to Excel. And you basically export all your schedules, which is in Revit where all your attributes for each element are stored and managed. Kicks those all out to an Excel spreadsheet, which then of course can be brought into ArcGIS. So for example, we have a door attributes table. And so here's all the Revit attributes, head height, frame material, and then also all of the additional attributes added by Quinn Evans for the purposes of managing this structure. So all the custom stuff they were added comes across as well. There's the ID and the type ID. So for each, say for example, doors. For every door in the mansion, there's a record in the doors table in Revit. And then for every type of door, so we could have 5 doors of the same type, 10 doors of another type, there's a door type table listing all the types of doors with all the common attributes for those. So there's basically 2 tables for each element type that we can then bring back into ArcGIS and do standard joins on the ID. So with this one here, we do some simple processing just to pull that number, that instance ID out into what I'm calling the Revit ID text. And then because to do a join, we need a numeric field. I cast it to a numeric value. Okay? So we got our geometry, and we got our attributes, and we got attributes that allow us to filter out what elements we're working with. And that comes in, all comes in as this thing called surface. So here's the kind of rough, raw form. And then if we go and take a look inside, you can see some of the more primitive view of what it looks like right when we bring it in without doing any cleanup or any coloring of materials or anything like that. So all this, the elements that are in here, we can then go in and do any selections by attributes that we want. And so that allows us to basically just pull out things like just the walls, the roof, the room spaces, which is actually more of a conceptual element in Revit, just representing the space of the entire, or any spaces in the model. Possibly even just 2D flat content to use for 2D floor plan mapping, other 2D content. Beams, so just the structure that Rob was talking about. Bring those out. But let's take a look at the walls. So here's the walls. When we open up the final attributes after they were all joined, you can see we've gone in and have just the attributes that the architect historians here are interested in. Materials, the links to the documentation, everything that Rob showed on his schematic for each element type. So now those are attached, right? They're attached to each piece of wall. And it's just a geodatabase feature class that all most GIS professionals are pretty adept at working with. From there, we take it into City Engine. And there's two main reasons we do that. One is to get it out onto the web through a browser. So here's running in Chrome. There's no plugin needed to run. Just go to the URL. I'm basically just running this one locally. So that was an important aspect of the end users, with that end user usability, not having any special skills to use it, to navigate around in it is just simply moving around with your mouse, panning, going anywhere you want to go. So here you can see we've done a couple different things. So the idea was to then merge that structure back to the landscape. And the fabulous GIS data that they have makes that pretty easy. So they have all the trees mapped, they have all the fences mapped, they have all the paths, basically a seamless coverage of the landscape as GIS content. So for us, it's just creating simple rules. For example, to go in and maybe do the fences in the way that various styles that they have. All the outbuildings. So while the mansion is a highly accurate BIM model, all of the outbuildings are simple shells modeled in both SketchUp. So Brady helped out with that. Thanks again, Brady. He did half, and then the other half were just done in City Engine, just using the manual modeling tools that are included in City Engine. The other reason we use it is to repaint elements or break up elements that need a finer grain of materials. So this is the same exact web scene that Tom showed last week. And we set up these bookmarks below here just to help really drive a presentation in front of almost 5,000 people. That can freak people out a little bit. So having these bookmarks kind of be available to drive this story makes it much more showable in an audience like that. So back down, we can pull off that rusticated exterior. Step inside. Various elements, it reports the information right back to us. If we take a look at the door areas, you'll start seeing the other reasons why we use City Engine. So in Revit, these doors are all modeled as one element, all kind of grouped together. So the moldings and the frieze? Architrave. See, I'm not an architect, just there. I always turn to him for my terms. They're painted differently, so we need to break those elements apart, and City Engine can give us, we're able to select an element in City Engine, and then select the sub-element of that, right-click and say, break it out into its own piece. So we can break out the areas that are painted white versus the areas that are painted buff. So as a prototype, we decided to attach all the attributes basically for the doors, floors, and walls initially, with the idea that then every element could eventually, upon full implementation, be attached back to its various attributes. So the wall patches. Here's the stuff Tom showed during the presentation, 1950, 1787. Various door elements have additional attributes specific to doors. We have some things that we didn't show in the interest of time. Okay. The linking it back to really the whole vision of this thing is this providing this content management delivery system. So all of the archives and research that they have, architectural descriptions, what have you, can be attached now to all the various elements. Oh no, I closed it instead of, oh that's bad. I just used up my 3 minutes right there, huh? No, this will load pretty quick. See, I didn't actually have to be up on stage delivering it. I just kind of helped build it. So I don't have my clicks all perfect like they did. All right, we'll take it back inside real quick. I wanted to show one more spot. So then taking us up into the framing, even some of the elements there, like the diagram from the 30s after I think the roof collapsed or the ceiling collapsed. So this was the work done in the 30s to reinforce it. So this is kind of just showing the overall vision of the prototype, right? Was we can reconnect that structure back to the landscape, and especially in a place like this, they're meant to go together. It's kind of like we wouldn't have built it here if this place wasn't what it was, right? It's all about location, location, location. And so next steps are a whole number of things. I'm not going to take the time to show the pro project, but we'll stick around afterwards for a while if you want to see or talk any more about it. The last thing I want to show is, let's take this back out. And I wanted to highlight just one more thing. So all of the elements in here through a browser. So once this is all downloaded and running in the browser, you can basically search on anything. So doors. So all the doors now, everything gets grayed out and just the doors are displayed. So you want to go to a specific door, You can go right to it. You can just kind of search for anything ad hoc. Windows. So just the windows. Is it? Not the realistic trees. Oh yeah, absolutely. So same thing with anything is also clickable. So here's a southern magnolia. Here's the GIS attributes on that. Eric or whoever did the survey provided a height and a crown, actually a crown diameter. The height of the trees we got from the LiDAR. So the surface models were used to get the accurate heights for those. And so I guess the last thing I'll leave you with is because this was a very finely controlled presentation, there's techniques that we use to make it show, best for the 5,000 people in the audience. And those techniques are things like setting up these bookmarks. So when I start zooming out, you'll start seeing holes, right? So there's some holes off to the side here now. So we're basically only loading in the data that we need for the specific kind of shots that we're setting up for the camera. And we're kind of using all of our memory and rendering capabilities for all of the detailed structure inside. So the end users of this are the architects that are focused at the structural scale, not so much the estate scale like Eric. Eric would be more of a user of something like ArcGIS Pro, where we can load in the entire estate like you saw in the video, all the trees, canopy surfaces across the river, all the leaf-on aerial photography that works better when you're doing tree canopy viewshed analysis. So in closing, I think we've all come to an agreement that this is the path that we're going to continue down. They're continuing, Quinn Evans is continuing modeling additional parts of the structure, and we will definitely be staying in close contact with Mount Vernon to kind of push this down the next level, which is really implementing it in a full meaningful way based on the design specs that they had so thoughtfully laid out. So it's really no programming involved. It's basically out of the box GIS stuff. So with that, I'll hand it back to Eric for a wrap up. Open it for questions.
Yeah, I don't really have anything much more to add at this point, other than that we're really excited about possibilities and really starting to work the 3D into some of our workflows and management. Horticulture is very excited about being able to use it, especially out to the public. I mean, this interface is a great way to let the public explore Mount Vernon and see stuff. So there's education possibilities. It's just lots of different things, even aside from what the initial project was designed for. So with that, we'll take some questions. I think we have the mics going. Yeah.
Is there a way to determine or to decide what kind of data you want to have available to different user groups so that you don't have to have everything that, for everyone to see?
Yeah, so like Patrick showed, so once you bring it over from Revit into ArcGIS and then City Engine, you can basically control, it breaks it all into the layers like you saw, the walls, the floors, all that stuff. And then really what comes into these web browser views is whatever you have in that ArcGIS document. So if the heating and air conditioning stuff comes over, we can just turn that layer off and then it doesn't get included. And you can make multiple web views, as many as we want. So you really control that in ArcGIS and then only export what you want to show into the web view. So.
Yeah, we have more ideas with what we want to do than we have time and money to do.
Yeah.
So are you guys planning to expand what you've done here in great detail with the mansion onto other locations on the property, say the outbuildings or other cultural resource areas like the tomb, the graveyard, anywhere else like that, horticulture?
Absolutely. So right now, Quinn Evans is working on finishing the rest of the mansion. Sort of the pilot area that we already did was just the new room, the one large nice room on the end of the house. And then the idea is over the next few years to do all the outbuildings. We can even incorporate, like this this building that we're in right now was modeled in BIM. That was one of the deliverables from the construction company and the designers, was a full 3D model in Revit of this building. So we could even incorporate that. And another big thing that we want to do, this didn't get showed in this, but if you were watching the video before, is to take this out beyond the land that we own now onto the other historic farms that Washington owned around, and be able to do 3D views of then and now to allow people to be able to see how the environment has changed. So there's lots more that we're wanting to extend this to.
Is there an archaeology layer we can see?
Not incorporated at the moment, but that is certainly in the plans, because not in this, we can't go under the ground in this particular view, can we? Yeah. Yeah, we can go underground. So so imagine the archaeology layers getting put in here, water and sewer data. If we wanted to model our entire sewer system, actually put it in with the accurate heights, drop that in, and then it would be secret tunnels. Yes, exactly. Nicolas Cage, we can even stick a little model of him in here. No, there doesn't actually exist any secret tunnels, unfortunately. I hate to break it to you from the movie, but so yes, we want to incorporate all that. So imagine being able to go in here and show me all the places where they dug in 1993, and then boom, it takes you in there, and even take photos, top-down photos, and drop them in there so you can see how the digs look. There's lots of possibilities. So.
Revit is used for the modeling, but the GIS is used for the creation of the tabs, so you can document different components. Or is that correct? Is that how?
Yeah, that's the basic of it. So Revit is the full-on hardcore software for doing the actual modeling. It's very expensive per seat of license. It's very difficult to learn and understand and know how to do. So, so that's where the model actually gets built. And then we use this as a very user-friendly, easy, cheap way to be able to extend it out to people who don't know how to use Revit. And what Rob was talking about with different tabs and stuff, we want, with some upcoming changes to the architecture of this particular software that Esri is working on, we should be able to customize what you see sort of on the right and add in and sort of create that vision of that Rob demoed in the PowerPoint, the different tabs, the different use case scenarios, so that you can actually have different tabs that are geared towards the interpreters, so they can get useful information they might want to tell the public, and then a different tab that would have stuff for the architects, a different one for the horticulture people, et cetera. So.
As the Revit model changes, the source model changes, do you have to restart the whole data transformation process, or can you just bring in the change?
Patrick?
Oh, yeah. So the question was, if as work gets done on the Revit model, do you have to kind of re-import the entire thing? Not necessarily. You can do that if you wanted, because most of the processing on our side is automated. So it'll write everything over into the new geodatabase the same way as it did the last time, with just the additional information. You could take a more advanced approach and via the instance ID, check which is new and what's not, and then only bring in the new stuff. So pretty much full control, especially using the data interoperability tools and the filters to only pull out what's new or only pull out specific things that you would want. There's a number of other various filters built into it that allow you to just kind of pull shell structure or other parts of it. So yes, there is. We haven't made it through a full production implementation to this point yet, so I expect there'll be some hiccups along the way. It's same for materials and textures. Those don't always cleanly come over yet as well, but as a first kind of iteration down this path, or down this kind of path that we're taking, we're all pretty pleased with how far we've been able to get. And we all, I think, agree that integrating BIM and GIS is a pretty natural win for both sides.
Do you have all the trees mapped and identified in the front circle at this point?
Yeah, so myself and Luke over the last year have been going out with surveying equipment and actually shooting in every individual tree and shrub. And we've been working with the horticulture department to help us identify, since we're not, plant people. So we've done that for what we call the bowling green, that the large grassy area. I can show you the large grassy area out front. So yes, all these trees that you see here, as well as on the east lawn, come straight from our data. We haven't extended that quite around to all the lanes and down around the tomb, but we have plans on doing that too. Horticulture wants to start using GIS as a way to manage all their trees and shrubs as well. So we're partway there, and we're heading the rest of the way. I don't see any other immediate questions, and we're at our time or past. So I think we'll call this presentation an end. Okay, so we will wrap up. What do we want to say for wrap up?
Well, we'd like to thank all of our presenters for coming forward and throwing out the papers. The great thing about this user group, if you will, that we've kind of put together is that we throw out an open call for papers, and we really have no idea what we're going to get. So it's up to all of you to kind of throw us back information, and then we go ahead and put the program together. And independent of any overarching theme, we had 3 papers get presented in this meeting that were all 3D oriented and based, which I think is a really cool thing. So once again, thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to our attendees for braving the weather and coming out to make this event a success. And if we're still on live stream, thank you to all of you who have been bearing with us as we work with our new technology, and we're glad to have reached so many people kind of through this this new technology and this space. And just in the spirit of collaboration within historic preservation for the deployment of GIS, I'd like to make a plug for our field school that we offer here. Mount Vernon, with the help of the University of Maryland, offers a field school that lasts for 6 weeks in historic preservation that brings together not only archaeology but architectural history, and we're starting to feature GIS in that too. So for those of you that are in touch with educators or are in the academic fields and you'd like to make this available to your students, please let them know. And we have an announcement that's already up through our Facebook page. So that's all I have to say. Eric?
So one of the things which we've not been very good about in the past, and which I'm going to try to do better this time, is I'm going to say it right now so people can hold it to me. On Monday, I'm going to send out an email that has the link to the archived video of this session, as well as links to various videos that we've seen and people's presentations, contact information for the presenters and that type of thing, to be able to let you follow up and sort of have a record of what you saw here today. With that also, if you have any, this is our 3rd time we've done this, and I think we've sort of figured out the format and the way it works, and seems to be going pretty well. But if you have any specific comments about how it went, or things you might think would be good to change or that thing, please talk to me or Luke. We're always open to suggestions to try to improve the meeting and make sure it meets everybody's needs. Yes. Yeah. So we're trying to do this every 6 months. So we'll be doing another one end of summer, early fall, date to be determined. If you're here, we already have your information because you RSVP'd, and you will be included on the next email blast about the time and the date for that. That being said, we do like to offer, if anybody would like to brave the weather with us, we are willing to take people over. It's 18
degrees right now.
Yeah, so. And very windy. But if anybody would like to go over to the historic area, we'll be happy to walk you over there. Go up to the mansion, go around to the back side, sort of take in the view shed and everything like that. And then I think we're shutting down at 4 o'clock right now is the closing time during the winter here. But you're welcome to sort of browse around until the interpreters kick you off. So.
If people want to go over, we've got a group working in the mansion. We've been doing a restoration of the central stair, which dates from 1757. I'll be in there with a professional photographer, and so if you guys go over with Eric and Luke, you're welcome to hang out, right up and before or a little bit after. So.
Yep. Also, nobody's going to kick you out of here immediately. If you want to hang and talk with a few people and sort of catch up, at least for the next half hour or something, you're welcome to sort of hang out in this room here. And with that, I think that's everything. Thank you. Okay. So if you want to go over to the mansion, sort of gather over in this corner by the door here, and we'll head out in about 5 minutes.